Well, hello to you all. Lovely to be with you for our Sunday message on Ganubi Methodist Online. My girls tell me that one of the first things they learned about horse riding is that you have to look in the direction that you want the horse to go. Apparently, when you look somewhere, your whole body wants to go in that direction. So your arms, your hips, your legs, your weight automatically shift to take your body to where your eyes are looking. And the horse responds to that. I also saw a research article in the National Geographic titled, "Do Lost People Really Go Round in Circles?" The article said, the result, they did indeed go round in circles when they couldn't see or when the sun or moon weren't visible. It seems that with some sort of reference point, we're entirely capable of walking in a straight line. Without any such cues, we quickly veer off course. Our scripture for today comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 9, from verse 1 to verse 41. And the title of today's message is, "What we see is what we get." May the Lord bless His word to our lives. Jesus and His disciples are walking through town when they see a man born blind. His disciples, like many, attributed his suffering to some kind of divine punishment. And so they asked Jesus whether it was this man's own sin or his parents' sin that resulted in his blindness. Jesus' reply is in verse 3. "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life." In essence, Jesus' reply says that a person's outer circumstances don't necessarily reflect their heart. It was the same with Job's suffering. And so Jesus tells his disciples that this man's suffering has nothing to do with sin. In suffering, we also tend to ask, why did this happen? But this is a question that keeps us looking backwards. Looking in this direction keeps us locked in the darkness and pain of the past. But Jesus teaches his disciples to look in the opposite direction, to rather look forward by asking the question, how is God going to bring life out of this situation? But how can we look forward in hope when there's so much darkness around us? And Jesus answers this too. In verse 5, he tells us, "I am the light of this world." And so the first point I draw from our passage is this: the light of the world. Jesus coming to our world has given us a way out of the darkness. Jesus coming now gives us a choice. Will we believe that he is the light of God? That he is able to bring hope and new life to destroy our darkness and pain? Or will we choose to continue to stumble along in the darkness of our natural habitat and habits? And then, to prove that this is a real and reasonable choice, Jesus enables the man born blind to see. Jesus takes away this man's natural darkness and floods his life with light. Now the light that flooded this man's life began to expose the darkness in others. Those that knew him began to spread a malicious rumor. "Isn't this the guy who used to sit around begging?" From the court case that follows, they seem to be claiming that he was a fraud who had conned them out of their shekels by pretending to be blind. And when this chap innocently confirms that he is the guy who was born blind, the people demand that he please explain why he can suddenly see. And so he tells them. But when he's unable to present Jesus to confirm his story, they haul him off to the Pharisees, the magistrates' court of the day. We'll pick up the story at verse 15 and verse 16 of our passage. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, How can a sinner do such miraculous signs? So they were divided. The second point I raise from our passage is this: the darkness of the world. So appearing before the magistrates is a man who is testifying that he has been healed from a lifetime of blindness. But so blind are the Pharisees in their own darkness that all they can see is that Jesus broke the law by opening shop on the Sabbath. And they begin to argue with each other about whether it's possible for a sinful lawbreaker to do miracles. Eventually, the Pharisees ask the accused what he thinks about Jesus. But faced with such darkness, the man's not prepared to commit, and so he answers, He is a prophet, verse 17. But his accusers, just as blind by their darkness, aren't interested in who Jesus is. They just want this man to be declared a fraud. And so the magistrates summon his parents, who testify that A, this man is their son, and B, that he was born blind. But more than that, they refuse to get involved. They choose to remain blind to Jesus. And here's why, verses 22 and 23 of our passage. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, He is of age, ask him. The people amongst whom they lived had chosen darkness. They were determined to reject Jesus. So emphatic was their choice that they would expel anyone who did look to Jesus. And so these parents choose to remain amongst those in darkness. The third point I draw from our passage is the darkness of the world versus the light of the world. On the one hand, the accused man had been deeply touched by the light of Jesus. On the other, he was being severely bullied by the darkness of the blind. And so he starts to put it all together. When the magistrates remind him that he's under oath and instruct him to start from the beginning, he realizes that they are not interested in the truth. And so somewhere here, he makes his own choice. Because we hear a very different man from verse 25. The man replied, Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Then they asked him, What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? In these last few words, this once blind man exposes what's really going on. It was about their hatred of Jesus, their rejection of the light. Their reaction to his observation is telling. They go into a fit of rage, insulting and humiliating him for speaking the truth. And when he continues to speak the truth, they condemn him as an irredeemable apostate, throw him out and slam the door on him. But look what happens, verse 35. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Thrown out into no man's land, rejected by those in darkness, it is Jesus who looks for this man to rescue him. And all that Jesus needs to rescue him is for this man to choose Jesus as his rescuer. And so Jesus tells him who he is. And this once blind man says, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And so lastly, we look at the light of the world or the darkness of the world. This one man's life becomes an example of what God sent Jesus to do. Jesus is the one who came into our world to rescue us out of the darkness. If we acknowledge that we are in darkness, spiritually blind from birth, and believe that Jesus is God's light to heal us, to redeem us, to rescue us, then Jesus will open the eyes of our souls and flood our lives with the light of God for all eternity. Our passage also gives us examples of darkness. Those who have physical light, but who are as blind as bats collecting in their caves of spiritual darkness. Those who are adamant that they can see just fine in the darkness of this world and reject the light of God that Jesus brings. And so Jesus says in verse 39, For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. What Jesus means is that from the moment he came into our world, we have all been given a choice. We have heard what Jesus has done for us on the cross, that he is the Savior. We have heard the good news that he is risen, that he is Lord over all. The blind man chose to look at Jesus, and the eyes of his soul were opened to see God. Those who chose the darkness will never see God. As people often do, the blind man first met Jesus in his brokenness, and Jesus responded by meeting his immediate need and giving him just a small glimpse of his power and love. And in this, the seeds of faith were planted to cure this man from his terminally dire spiritual blindness that still kept him in eternal darkness. But he still had to make the choice. Do I keep living in the darkness in me and around me? Or do I turn to Jesus and commit to living in the light of the world? Because there's a cost to choosing Jesus. We'll probably get thrown out of the world's synagogues. And in Ephesians 5 verse 8, God tells us that those who choose Jesus, for you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. Looking to Jesus means looking away from darkness. In any event, the gains and pleasures and camaraderie of darkness are fruitless, says God. They are a case of short-term gain, but eternal loss. But to look to Jesus, to believe in him, and to choose to give him our lives in worship of him will guarantee that the light of the world will open the eyes of our soul, and the light of God will come flooding in for all eternity. What we see is what we get. During this time of Lent, we're challenged to think about where we're looking now. Are we looking back into the darkness for the things we think we need? Or is the Lord truly our shepherd? Are we looking ahead, following the one who has already given us so much mercy and grace? The way of the cross is never going to be easy in this world. It certainly wasn't easy for Jesus either. But if we keep our eyes on Jesus, the way of the cross will lead us further and further into the light of God, until at last our souls are overflowing with the goodness, mercy, and love of God forever. What we see is what we get. God bless you.